and hopefully increase that mortgage penetration, right, to levels of other neighboring countries, right, and decrease that backlog that I was talking about. So that's kind of our vision. Obviously, as a fintech company, you can build more product, you can go into different directions.
Sit Stop, strategi, wawasan, dan cerita inspiratif seputar dunia investasi.
Hi guys, my name is Shana. I'm the founder of Mars Investing Club, and today beside me there is Mr. Ilya Kravtsov. Did I mention your name correctly?
Yes, all good, all good.
That's perfect. Yep, Mr. Ilya is the founder of Ringkas. Ringkas basically is a platform, the matching service platform for mortgage applicants with financial institution in Indonesia. And Ringkas was launched in 2021 with the goals, very, very noble goals, to make home ownership is easier and more accessible for everyone. So first thing first, thank you, Mr. Ilya, for coming here.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. A bit of traffic, but okay.
Yeah, it's Jakarta, you know. Yeah. Okay. Well, the first thing I'm really curious is Ringkas was launched in 2021, and that is the moment when actually Indonesia government give like a very aggressive incentive for property sector. So in your view, how is the current update of property in Indonesia? I mean, like, what's the specialty of our market actually?
Well, look, in Indonesian property market, you're right. During the pandemic, the government gave a boost, which was the incentive, basically tax deduction, right? And that was done to facilitate, purchase and demand of houses. But Indonesia is quite a unique country because the property demand is extremely strong, and mainly due to the fact that currently in Indonesia, according to the government numbers, there is a backlog of housing estimated to be roughly somewhere between 12 to 14 million people or households. So this means that there's 40 million households who technically should own a property, a house, but they don't own yet. So they either live with parents or they live in they rent, right?
Yeah, right.
So the gap is really big and the demand is very strong.
So do you think actually like the home ownership in Indonesia is still low, or is it still?
For sure. I mean, this backlog basically shows that there is a huge potential to reducing that backlog. And actually, one of the government programs was launched, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, is that 1 million homes per year. So they want to make sure that 1 million homes are built and sold per year, right, to reduce that housing backlog, right?
Okay.
But so far it hasn't been yet reduced, so there's a lot of effort, and obviously financing is one of the issues when people consider buying a house, right?
Okay.
So we're trying to help with that problem and hopefully reduce financing, and as you said, make home ownership accessible for everybody.
Okay. Well, it is quite interesting when we witnessed that in 2021 there was a huge incentive, and for now, government has discontinued this incentive. Do you see any differences of vibes of demand from the consumer?
Actually, no, and this is not only due to the incentive. Actually, one could argue because if we're now in a situation where interest rates are very high all over the world, and usually interest rates have a very big impact on mortgage rates and hence on property demand. So obviously in other parts of the world, mortgage rate has gone really skyrocketed and people buy less. But Indonesia, I would say it's an outlier. So strangely, well, the central bank did increase a bit the interest rates, but actually the banks have kept the mortgage rates relatively affordable and low. So the demand is still very strong in Indonesia. And historically, if you look at the mortgage rates, let's say 5-6 years ago in Indonesia, they were all double digits. But now with BCA, you can get 2.6%. I mean, obviously fixed rate for 1 year or 2 years. So historically, the mortgage interest rates are are low, and that's what also stimulates the demand for people to buy. So, in nutshell, Indonesia very strong property market at the moment.
Yes, I do agree on that point because I last checked, the mortgage rate is like 8.4% for now, and then compared to like 6 years ago, it's like 11%. Oh my God, yeah, it's so.
You see, and that's what customers are used to, and we have some of our clients that see basically history high record of sales coming from KPR, which is mortgage, compared to sales in cash, right? So, so if you see historical total sales from mortgage is climbing, and it's, I think on average in Indonesia is about 60% now. So 60% of all houses are bought through mortgage. Right, and I think that's only going to increase moving forward.
Okay, well, back to Ringkas itself. Ringkas in Indonesia means a very brief, concise, and short, and something very simple. I feel I'm just curious which step or process actually that is Ringkas trying to shorten during the moment of KPR itself.
Well, I don't know if you applied to KPR in Indonesia yourself or if you bought a house, but for people who go through that experience, the experience is a little bit lengthy and complicated, and usually it's also a manual process. So what happens is if you apply for a mortgage, it depends whether you buy a new house or already a second-hand house. But let's say if you buy a new house, usually you go to a property developer, you identify the house you want, and then you decide, okay, I want this house and I will apply for a mortgage. And then you will start collecting a series of documents that are required for a mortgage, right? And obviously to minimize your chances of rejection from the bank, you usually would also want to apply for multiple banks, right? Yeah. So then you would need to collect all these documents and then bring these documents manually to a physical branch in a bank. Right, and then if you apply for 3 or 4 or 5 banks, you need to do the same process 3 or 4 times, right? So that requires, and then once you apply, then there is a waiting time for them to check the documents, to check your background, and then come back to you whether there's anything missing. Then there's a back and forth of what is missing, and again multiplied by several banks, and then usually they would come up with a decision whether you accept it or reject it. Right, and whether if you're rejected, then you might want to try with more banks, right? So we've seen this process on average can take anywhere from 4 weeks to actually like 6 months, right? And our vision is to first of all help the customers, inform them, right, of where they stand today in a very simple and fast manner. So we have a feature called pre-qualification. Where we try to pre-qualify them instantly and saying, okay, you're actually qualified for buying that house, right? You have enough income, you have enough down payment, you don't have any bad credit history, and so you can, and we do that instantly, right? So we provide them that visibility, which sometimes if they don't use us takes weeks. And then the second thing is we facilitate what we call a digital application. So you need to fill only one application that goes digitally, not manually, to multiple banks at the same time, right? So I always compare it for maybe the audience is that something simple, right? When I arrived to Indonesia 10 years ago, there was no OTA, there was no Traveloka, there was no ticket.com, right? And what would happen is you would go to a mall and to a travel agent and buy a physical ticket for Garuda or AirAsia and so on, right? And then Traveloka came, so you can do it, on your phone directly, and then you can see all the different airlines and select the best one for you, right? So we're a little bit the same, but for mortgages, right? At the moment, in the mortgage space, we are like 10 years ago that we're in the travel space, right? So you do it in a very manual, one-by-one way, but we allow them to do it digitally to multiple banks and basically increase the transparency and the chances of getting approved.
Okay, that's very interesting. But let me confirm about pre-qualification. Is it a real-time one, or is there any time for the customer to wait for the result?
No, it's real time. So basically, you are required to submit a certain documents like your ID, etc., etc., and then real time will give you an assessment of where you stand, right? And whether you can get approved for that particular house, which will, and we estimate how much interest rates you would need to pay on a monthly basis, and whether we believe that the banks can accept you or not. Obviously, we don't give you the final decision because we cannot do that, but we can fairly assess with high chances whether you can get approved or not.
Okay. Again, regarding to the real-time pre-qualification, it means Ringkas provide the database or like the KYC process. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so we do work with. So we are, first of all, we are licensed. We are TERNYATA and OJK, right, ourselves. But we do also work with licensed partners that provide KYC services. So obviously KYC is the first step. Then the second step is the assessment of customer income information, etc., etc. But again, so there's a few steps to get that, but the result is instant, right? So
yep. Okay, I got it. So again, talking about digitalization, it's so amazing to see Ringkas cut this problem. But let me ask you about the difference penetration. I mean, like in Jakarta, everyone is really easy to access the internet and so on and so forth. But what about the rural area who wants to use Ringkas as well, but actually the internet penetration is not that good? How do you see this kind of problem?
So the way we work is, so what we see in Indonesia, still people prefer like a serviced approach, right, rather than self-service, right, for many things. So that's why we work hand in hand with large property developers, and we provide the large property developers with a system to be able to onboard their customers and channel them to the banks. And usually it's very true, some of our projects are in very remote locations. But the marketing galleries of those projects usually do have fairly okay internet, right? That allows us still to process them in a digital way, right? So in that sense, we rely more on those marketing galleries where our property partners sit.
May I know how many developers and also banks that has been integrated to Ringkas?
So we work with majority of the banks in Indonesia. So I would say we cover like more than 95% of all mortgage lenders in Indonesia.
Wow. Okay.
Right. So we have partnerships with where we probably imagine the usual suspects: Mandiri, BCA, CIMB, OCBC, Permata, Danamo, and so on and so forth. You can find them on our website. We do also work with large property developers, and now we're live in around 20 cities in Indonesia. So we're obviously live in Jakarta area, we're live in Surabaya, Sidoarjo, Malang, we are live in Medan, Makassar, Palembang. So we do cover quite broad across Indonesia. So we have clients spread out.
That's interesting. I studied in Malang.
Okay, very good.
Okay, well, yeah. Oh, my pardon. I forgot to say congratulations for your funding.
Thank you.
May 2023 is around like 3.5 million US dollar, right?
That's correct.
Yep. So, may I know like the use or maybe the realization of this funding as for now? How many percentage?
Oh, well, we just raised it, right? So we haven't spent it all. But the idea, obviously, I mean, we're a company that we want to invest in letting people know what is mortgage and what is KPR, and that actually whether they can qualify or not. But there's a lot of educational aspect around it, right? That's why I'm here today, right? So to make people realize that even though they might not have a lot of savings, they might still be able to qualify for a house and basically create that generational wealth, right? But then it is not only one city problem, right? It's a countrywide, and as I mentioned, we did already scale up across like almost 20 cities, so that requires additional resources, right? And one of the key reasons for us to raise this last funding round was to launch our services across multiple cities in Indonesia, right? Because obviously, as I said, there are more remote areas where the problem still persists, and you still want to be able to help out people.
Okay, well, I noticed that you mentioned about savings, and it seems that currently, in my peers as well, they are so confused. They confuse between should I rent or buy a house,
Yeah.
and some of them choose to rent a house. Do you see this kind of mindset will be the challenges for Ringkas to penetrate in this current situation?
For sure. I think in Indonesia, that mindset, of millennials, of not willing to commit to something and buying a house seems like
That's true.
a very big deal. But I mean, you have a lot of, in the government, there's a lot of talks around that. But I think there's a few interesting things, right? So in Indonesia, people do get married relatively early, right? And there's about 1.8 million marriages a year. And then also when people do get married, they would like to have like their own place, right, rather than to live with parents or to rent. So I think that definitely helps. But I think it's important to highlight that if you do own a house, it basically brings wealth to your family, but not only to your generation, to your kids and grandkids, right? So having a house is kind of like a wealth generation that one can think about, right? So it's not a burden. It's on the opposite,
Yeah.
something that you carry across. And in other markets, you can actually utilize your house as an asset to maybe get more financing for your small business, right? So it can unlock, actually, this asset can unlock more capital to you to actually generate even more wealth, right? So it's called a productive load, right?
Yeah.
In that sense. So I think we hope that slowly the mindset will shift and people understand that actually they're investing in the future, they're investing in their family, and they're investing in their next generations, which is obviously very, very important.
And maybe this is a classic question, but everyone will be so curious. What do you think, like the sustainability of Ringkas? What the spiritual values of Ringkas as for now?
Well, this, obviously when you're building a company, we think about it a lot, and we try to get inspired by other successful founders out there. Company culture is very important because we're still relatively small, but then when you grow to a size where you don't know everybody by name, the culture that you created in the first place is what will make you successful or fail, right? So that's why it's very important we do have our own principles that we follow, right? And actually, whenever whoever joins Ringkas is onboarded according to those principles. So we try to stress them multiple times. We even give awards when people do follow those principles, right? And this is a way for us to kind of get this culture going from the early days, right? So to make sure that everybody's very clear, because for us, attitude comes always before any hard skills, right? So you might be the best, but if the attitude is wrong, then maybe Ringkas is not the right place for you, right? So we do invest a lot in building that for the future. Obviously, we'll see how it goes, right? But I think we're fairly positive that people also join us not only to to join like a startup or fintech startup, but also to have an impact on the Indonesian society, right? And help people like with a good cause, right? And I think that drives a lot of the behavior of people joining us. And this is also very part of our culture, and we want to really maintain that.
That's great. May I know what's next of Ringkas? Maybe like 2 or 3 years. I mean like 5 years.
Oh, difficult to say, right? So at the moment, we are really we're laser focused on solving that problem. I think our goal is that we really would love to, there's been mortgage penetration in Indonesia to GDP ratio is still very low. It's below 3%, and a lot of the population, especially for the cheaper housing, like below 1 billion, are still struggling to get mortgages. So we hope that by digitizing a big portion of that process and industry, we can unlock more and bring more to the banks, right? And hopefully increase that mortgage penetration, right, to levels of other neighboring countries, right? And decrease that backlog that I was talking about. So that's kind of our vision. Obviously, as a fintech company, you can build more product. You can go into different directions. It's very early to say now because we're still trying to tackle a very large problem, right? So once we solve it, then we probably will think to the next step.
Yeah. So it's kind of surprising. Only 3%. Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
actually
so
below is
small.
2.94.
Wow. Okay. So maybe this is the last one. What's your best advice, the wisest advice for like millennials or Gen Z or everyone who wants to take KPR, but they are doubting themselves like, could I take KPR? Yeah.
Well, I think the main advice is obviously if you want to buy a house, you need to start saving, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't have any savings, it will be very hard for you to, to fulfill the down payment. And something that we will be probably launching also in the future is a down payment savings program. But I really recommend to everybody before you get married, with your first job, start saving. Don't spend everything, right? Don't live from salary to salary, right?
Okay.
Put a little bit aside, and then when the moment you get married, you have enough for your down payment. That's my main advice.
Thank you so much. Don't live paycheck to paycheck. Just delayed gratification will be so good for you in the future. So that's all our podcast with Mr. Ilya, founder of Ringkas, and hopefully all of this information will help you to be to have a better mindset about KPR and so on and so forth. And best of luck for
Thank you so
Ringkas
much.
as
Thank you for
well.
having me. Thank
Yes,
you for allowing me to
and
share.
yeah, see you on the next podcast. Bye, guys. Have a good day.
Bye bye.
Seeds, investing together.